What's going on, everybody? It is the one and only Q here from Retro Q Gaming, and unfortunately, due to some horrible timed lighting issues, well, here we are looking a bit old school at the same time. So, what is going on, everybody? We are here with our 81st episode of our Quack Experimental Podcast. Now, there are a huge amount of things to talk about today because, frankly, we've put this off for a little bit, and so much has happened in all that time. So, we do have plenty of it to go through. So, first off, we'll start with Nintendo. Now, Nintendo have been in the news, if you will, for some bad reasons lately. And this one is another continuation of all of that, because we're talking about Soy Con Drift yet again. Now, many times there have been class action lawsuits in the US and all over the world, but it's really a big thing in the US about the Soy Cons and how poorly made they are and how it leads to stick drift. In fact, there are multiple cases out there where stuff drifts on the first day. Remember the Nintendo Switch Lite? Yeah, that was a big one because you can't detach the Soy Cons. They're built into it, so you buy it and you have to send it off day one or get a replacement for the whole unit or something like that. Now, this one is a little bit more interesting and a little bit more important because now the European Consumer Organization is called in to investigate because they have received over 25,000 official complaints about Nintendo here in Europe. Now, this is important because Nintendo have a very, very bad history in business in general, but especially in Europe. I'm going to take this opportunity to remind you that Nintendo was found guilty of price fixing in the 90s here in Europe, and they are no longer, since then, allowed to do any type of price, I guess you could say price setting, because Nintendo have been found guilty of underhanded, shady, shitty business practices, as they have been multiple times over their, well, I guess 30, 40 years in this continent. Now, hopefully this goes through and hopefully something is done about all this, because we can't keep letting companies get away with subpar business practices, subpar quality products. That's the Switch in a nutshell, really, though, isn't it? But yeah, hopefully this holds them accountable for the whole thing and something gets done about it. Be it free repairs, be it forced to change the idea about it, or a massive fine that outweighs the... See, usually when companies get fined, you get fined $2 million or €2 million in this case because it's Europe. But at the same time, despite all their negligence and all, they've made $5 billion out of this particular market with this particular issue. And then they're fined like a couple of million. It's not really worth it. You have to be made an example of. Not just Nintendo, but anyone. You have to understand. See, these companies, they weigh this risk versus reward. And they'll say, okay, we can do this now real cheap and real crap. We'll get sued or we'll lose or whatever because we've done this poorly. And sure, we might get fined 5 million, but we've made $1 billion. Necessary risk versus reward. You have to make it so that it's not a viable option. You have to keep going and fuck them all over. Now, speaking of negative stuff in games and games development, we're going to talk a little bit about game development studios. In this particular case, we're going to talk about Vicarious Visions, aka RIP Vicarious Visions. They're the company, or the development studio rather, because they are owned by Activision Blizzard, who basically saved Crash Bandicoot and probably Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. They're the ones behind the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 new remaster, as well as the original trilogy remasters for Crash Bandicoot. And of course, because of the success of the Crash Bandicoot trilogy remaster, or remakes I should call them, they went on to finally, they didn't develop the new proper Crash Bandicoot 4, but it renewed interest in the series because it was a quality remake, and now we have that game. So they basically saved the series. But the big problem with all this, despite Vicarious Visions doing a quality remake for both of these series and both of these IPs, they are now not being given the next entry. Obviously, they didn't make Crash Bandicoot 4. They're not being given whatever it is, a new Tony Hawk game or remastering 3 and 4 or one of the other Tony Hawk games or anything like that. No. They're being dissolved, disbanded, and all 200-ish, the numbers are between 200 and 220 from what I've seen, the 200-ish employees are all being just absorbed into the Blizzard side of it. So they're no longer Vicarious Visions, they're just more Blizzard support staff. They're going to be working with the likes of Overwatch, they're going to be working with the likes of StarCraft 2, Diablo, anything that's counted as a Blizzard game. Not an Activision Blizzard game, just the Blizzard side of it. Anything that is counted as Blizzard. They're nothing but a support role now. How bullshit is that? How absolute bullshit is that? A studio that did excellent work when it came to their last two projects. Renewed interest in the series of one of them so much that a successful, viable sequel was made. And this is how they get screwed. It's absolutely bullshit if you ask me. But it doesn't stop there. We have other development studio related news as well, and this one comes in the form of Tencent. No, not Epic Games and Timmy Tencent, but just regular old vanilla Tencent, if you will. Now, we all know over the last couple of years, Tencent has been putting their fingers in as many pies as possible when it comes to gaming, game technology, game studios, game development, etc., etc. And now, this continues to be the trend. Because now Tencent have actually acquired a minority stake in Dontnod. If you don't remember what Dontnod are, I'll give you a quick refresher. They've made the absolute masterpiece, couldn't say that with a straight face, that is Remember Me. They've also made Life is Strange to much critical acclaim, and just fairly recently, just maybe a week or two ago, by the time you're seeing this, I streamed their latest game, Tell Me Why. Good stuff, but the idea is there. So, what we know about this so far is that Tencent have paid 30 million euro for an undisclosed percentage of the Dontnod studio. Now, it's still a minority stake, so they don't have a proper true say in the direction or anything like that. It's just a small minority stake. Now, why they're doing this is actually for a different reason than many people would expect. Usually it's to get into a big market, I guess say when they invested a significant share in Epic Games. That would open them up to a huge market. So many people use Unreal Engine. So many people play Fortnite. So much money comes in from all of that. So they would get, I believe it's 40% cut when it comes to Epic of that. Now, with Dontnod, it's a little bit different. They're actually partnering or investing with Dontnod specifically so that they can market to the Chinese market, which of course, as anyone knows, is the biggest individual country in the world. Hence, well, when it comes to gaming markets, the Chinese market is the biggest gaming market in the world. So yes, there's a billion people there that they want to potentially tap into. So this, because Tencent is partially funded, or is it even, it might even be fully funded, I can't remember how the whole situation works, by the Chinese government. It gives them more freedom and they can collaborate with Dontnod a bit more. For example, when a game is released or a game is made or whatever it is and then wants to go and release in China, no matter who it is or what it is or wherever it is, they have to partner with a Chinese publisher. Now, this means they could possibly, potentially, work with Dontnod, Tencent work with Dontnod, and Tencent be the publisher. Look at it that way. They don't have to pay someone out externally. It's all completely unclear, at least anyway. Not 100% clear, 100% unclear just yet, because we don't know the percentage that was done, and we don't know how it's going to affect business dealings and all as well. So that's something to note in there too. The other one is the also big question about possible censorship, simply because if Tencent have even a minority stake in there, granted they can't specifically and expressly tell them to do something and censor it so they can release it in the Chinese market and be that same censored version everywhere else, it might also just influence them when they're making a game. After all, there's certain rules of what you can and can't show in China in video games, and maybe the regular version in the rest of the world was planned to have all that stuff. But then they figured, oh, you know what, instead of censoring it so we can release it in China, why don't we just change it so that it's censored everywhere? This can be a bit of a problem, and this is one thing I am not happy with. But another thing coming up that I am very, very happy with is our next topic, which is GameStop. Now, there's been much talk about GameStop the last, I guess it's over a week at this point, and so much changes in so quick time, and there's so much going on that I purposely wanted to wait a little while, about a week or so, just to get as much in as possible. But granted that all of this was accurate and up to date by the time I took these notes, it's probably changed by the time I finish recording, editing, rendering, and uploading this video, by the time you're seeing it, which is probably like 6 hours later. So, anyway, if you haven't been paying attention, something has been happening with the GameStop stock price. Reddit have had their way with it. Now, basically, the big one in this one is who are Reddit fucking with? It's Reddit versus hedge funds. Now, here's where this one gets a bit big and interesting. So I have to just basically read from my notes here because this is weird. So stock traders on Reddit, that's right, not the Wall Street guys, just the regular old stock traders on Reddit, have been driving up the price of the GameStop shares based on nothing but speculation, as Wall Street and the stock market does. Now, what's been happening is it involves driving the price up as Wall Street was trying to short sell GameStop shares. Now, basically, before we go any further, I have to explain what short selling something is. Short selling is essentially borrowing shares from someone who has them, selling them, and then you have a date you have to return them by. So what you hope to do is, let's make a quick example. I have 100 shares in GameStop. I don't really, but I'm just using this as an example. And let's say each share at the current time is $10. You want to short sell them from me. So you borrow those 100 shares, sell them for $10 a piece, and then over the next 2 weeks, there's a 2-week time limit on this. You have to return those shares to me within 2 weeks. So you hope the share price goes down to maybe $1 a share. You buy back the 100 shares, give them to me, and you keep the difference. I have the same amount of shares that I originally had, and you have X amount of profit and difference. Now, the big problem with this is that the price can also go up. So when you borrow them from me at $10 a pop, and you sell them for $10 a pop, maybe the price goes up to $15, maybe $20 a share. Maybe it goes up to $50, maybe it goes up to $100. Maybe in the cases like this, it goes to $200, $250, even up as high as $500. 2 weeks later, you still have to return the same amount of shares to me, even if it means you have to pay €500 or $500 a share to get me back my shares by the allotted arranged time. So that's how this all works with money and all, and how money can be lost, how money can be gained when it comes to short selling stuff. Essentially, it's borrowing shares, selling them, and trying to replace them at a lower price within a certain amount of time. But that can go the other way too. Anyway, hopefully that gives you a quick idea of it. So, because all of this, it involves driving up the price because Wall Street were trying to short sell GameStop shares. Typically what would happen is when you start short selling stuff, everyone gets worried and everyone does it in large volumes and the price comes down, which is what they want. So they were essentially trying to nearly bankrupt GameStop shares. But what was happening was the people on Reddit were buying significant amounts of shares once they went down and down and down. And because other people were buying them normally and not shorting them, that means the price has been driven up significantly. The price was driven up. It was about $14.90 when it started. Then it went up 15, 20, 25, 40, 50, 100, 120, 200, 250. It went up as high as 500 and something at the highest peak that I noticed. So, think about it this way. These companies, these hedge funds, they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not tens of millions or whatever it is, amounts of stock. And if you look at the price at, let's just call it $15, it was like $14.90. But if you short, let's say, 1 million shares at $14.90, $15, you're hoping it's going down so you can replace them at maybe $1 a pop or $5 a pop, and you've made all that, extra $10, $14 per share 1 million times over. But the problem is, if you pay $15 a share or sell for $15 and then the price goes up to $500, you now have to replace all those extra shares at those increased prices which is why it's driving these companies bankrupt, these hedge funds and all bankrupt. It's crazy. It's going into the millions, the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions, and even some companies are billions in the hole over just this alone. It's crazy. One hedge fund company in particular was hurt so badly that they needed a $3 billion bailout from the government. They got that, and by the end of the same day, it was wiped out because the price kept going up. That is nuts. And that just goes to show how bad the stock market can be gamed. Now, the funny thing about this is that this is possibly going to lead to part of a large stock market crash, as we've all happened before. And you know, they'll all still get their government bailouts like they did in 2008. Everyone else will get completely fucked over, and yeah, I mean, it's business as usual. But the best part of all of this is that from what we've seen, all the practices, everything going on is all completely legal and by the book. It's the same proper stuff that Wall Street uses. They do this stuff on purpose to make money. And this is exactly how stocks, how investment, how short selling, how squeezing, how all of this stuff actually works. It's done legally every day. The people on there, on doing this on Reddit and all, with their, maybe it's one guy with a single stock, maybe it's someone with hundreds of stock, maybe it's thousands, maybe it's millions. These people are doing it completely legally. It just goes to show that the rich people, the Wall Street people, don't like it when the poor people get to play with the rich people's money. But they only like it when the Wall Street guys, the rich guys, get to play and lose the poor people's money. This is going so well. You literally have these high billionaire Wall Street executives appearing on TV in literal tears, actually crying live on TV, because of them losing so much money over people doing the exact same thing that they're doing. And you know what? Not everyone, some people are doing it just to make money. Some people are doing it to send a message. Some people are doing it for whatever reasons as well. But you have so many stories out there. You go and check them all out. You can find announcements, you can find stories, heartfelt videos, confessions, whatever it is, of people and what they're doing with this money. Some people will say, oh, I have $5,000 to my name. I had basically nothing other than that. It's a last ditch effort. I put it in to GameStop stocks when it was $50. I sold them each for $450. I've made 20 grand, and it's just I don't know the number, but I've made 20 grand profit. I can pay for someone's retirement. I can pay a loan off. I can pay the rest off my house. I can give someone a retirement or someone a huge present. I can pay for some type of surgery that I needed, that a family member needed, something like that, that my pet needed, something along the lines of that. You have people using this kind of money as well. Some people are just doing it to stick it to Wall Street in general, but you have people, there's people out there that are buying hundreds of consoles, hundreds of PlayStation consoles, Xbox consoles, Switches, and donating them to charity. They are donating them to hospitals. They're donating just the straight up money, whatever it is. So, Wall Street, go fuck yourselves. But speaking of people and companies and all hurting, we have some more people hurting, some more games hurting, some more studios hurting at Microsoft, because over there the pain never stops. So this time we have Ninja Theory and how their latest game is pretty much bleeding out. You might remember the name as Bleeding Edge. So it is completely done. Bleeding Edge is finished. The game was panned and basically abandoned since practically day one. It has a maximum player concurrent count of like 60 on Steam ever. It's awful. The game no one wanted. It looked exceptionally bad, and clearly it has done exceptionally bad, because less than 1 year after launch, it's official, it's announced that Bleeding Edge is done. No more future content updates, no new anything. It's just still going to be online. They haven't said when they're going to take the servers offline. They might as well do it now, because let's face it, nobody's playing it as it is. So like I said, the 0 players that are playing it across all Xbox consoles and PC, no one gives a shit at this point. They'll pretend to care, but no one gives a shit at this point. But it's very, very typical of modern Microsoft game design. They'll try and pump out this crappy claymation copycat Game Pass fodder quality shite that's abandoned, that's panned, that's hated, that no one asks for and is no good, to the point where they've changed their fundamental studios and game design and based it around Game Pass. They just copy everything else. They make an Overwatch clone. Battleborn tried that too. That just went offline yesterday for the permanent thing. The servers went completely off. This is crap. This is a perfect example of how the Game Pass mentality is changing game design at Microsoft. And it's one of the many reasons. It's not the reason why they're in last place, but it's one of the many reasons why they're going to stay in last place. But next up, we can go to a different side of it. This one's not particularly about games, but it is two important things to note in here. One of them is not so much a bad thing, it's just a regular thing to talk about, but one of them is a little bit on the sadder side. So, first off, we're going to talk a little bit about the voice acting industry. There's two things to talk about, I said here, so we'll give them one at a time. The first up is that Roger Craig Smith is no longer the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog after 10 years. Now, he's been the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog for the last 10 years in pretty much everything new that is Sonic the Hedgehog, except Sonic in the new, what do we call, live action / semi CG film. He didn't voice Sonic in that, as far as I know. So they got some TV or film actor, I don't know who it was, but I just remember hearing about it in there anyway. So it's interesting to note, if you don't know Roger Craig Smith, he does so many different voices out there. He was the Batman in Batman Arkham Origins. He was most notably, obviously, Sonic. He's Ezio Auditore in Assassin's Creed 2. I guess any of the Assassin's Creed games that have Ezio in them. He was probably most notable in Resident Evil 5 as Albert Wesker. So most people know him from there. He's not retiring or anything like that. He's just no longer voicing Sonic the Hedgehog in like the games and the animated stuff and the CG stuff and all as well. It is important to note that right after this happened, Netflix and Sega announced Sonic Prime being the new next series coming to Netflix in 2022 without the voice of Roger Craig Smith. So they're probably, if you ask me, it's not announced who is going to be the voice actor in Sonic Prime, but we can probably assume that it's whoever did it in the Sonic film to kind of keep the consistency and the continuity in that one. But the other one that we do have to talk about here is on a little bit of a sadder note. Now, this is about someone named Jeanette Mouse, who unfortunately has died recently due to complications from colon cancer. Now, she doesn't have a massive amount of... Well, first off, she doesn't have a massive amount of acting credits as it is. If you look at her IMDb page, she has, I think it's just shy of 30 acting credits. I think it's about 28, 26, something like that. And only one or two of them, off the top of my head, only one of them really is video game related. Now, the reason why we bring this up is that it's a modern topical game because it's something that's just been, I won't say announced recently, but it's just been featured fairly recently, and the game is coming very, very soon. And one of the characters that she portrays in it is getting a lot of media attention, so it does come kind of close to it on the front there too. So basically what happened is that she voices one of the witch daughters in Resident Evil 8, and unfortunately, obviously, I'm going to assume that all her work is already done. We've seen her in the trailers. We've seen her in the demo as well. I am assuming all her work is done and completed on the game and will be released like that. So we'll see how it goes. But from what we did see, like I said, the only exposure to her work that I've seen personally is anything from the trailers and demos and all of Resident Evil 8, and she seemed pretty decent in it. And unfortunately, we won't see what would have been the rest of her career and the potential lived up to and all the other roles that she could have brought to life. And I'm a big fan of the voice acting industry in general, so it's such a shame that something like that is never going to be realized. So feels bad, man. Okay, we might have temporarily solved the lighting situation, but given everything that's going on right now, it's the best of what we can do with it anyway. So, what we have here next is a very important one to talk about. we've got MLB The Show, Major League Baseball The Show. Now, usually I wouldn't mention a sports game at all, let alone baseball, but this one has bigger and further reaching implications that are far more important that we do need to talk about. So, MLB The Show has been a PlayStation exclusive series for years at this point now. In fact, it's actually in-house developed by Sony Studios, by some of them. Now, I know they've recently rebranded with stuff like, I believe it's PlayStation Studios or something like that, but it's developed by an in-house Sony first-party studio. Now, in 2019, what happened? Because Sony used to have the exclusive MLB official license, just like, say, EA had licenses for Madden and FIFA and stuff like that, so no one else can make a football game, at least using official FIFA stuff and teams and licenses, the same with Madden and all as well. So, in 2019, MLB, the actual corporation or conglomerate or whoever it is that controls Major League Baseball in the US, originally, 2 years ago in 2019, they went to Sony and said, listen, if you want to keep this license, you have to go multi-platform. And Sony played ball, no pun intended. So Sony did that. And now, starting in April of 2021, it will be a multi-platform game on Xbox One, Xbox Series S, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5. There's currently no mention of a PC version, and I doubt we'll ever hear anything of a Nintendo Bitch version. But yeah, it's just interesting to note, because when you look at it this way, it's still developed in-house by Sony, and the box has a PlayStation Studios logo right on the front of it, even on the Xbox ones. So a Sony first-party developed game will now be released on Xbox. It's also important to note that it is going to be $60 for the Xbox One and PS4 versions and $70 for the Xbox Series S and PS5 versions, with no free upgrade paths available on either platform, be it Xbox or PlayStation. So yeah, it's the times they are changing. The days of stuff like this are numbered, but it's going to be really interesting to see. Now that Sony's $70 price point, like they do on their own platform, is going with their games, or their game at least, on the other side of it. Anyway, it just doesn't really affect me personally. I have no interest in it, and I mean, no one buys Xbox consoles anymore anyway. The console is dead, and it's flopped already. But they do launch on other platforms now. We have Horizon on PC. Who knows what else? Now, next up, we can talk a little bit about current gen upgrades because, well, frankly, the consoles continue to disappoint. So, several games so far have gotten minor patches when it comes to the PlayStation 5. So, most usually this will just steady the frame rate a little bit more or steady the dynamic resolution a little bit more. Most of the time, it's nothing really major. There are one or two smaller exceptions, like Ghost of Tsushima and Days Gone, which had proper patches in a sense to double the frame rate. They're not proper next gen versions of the game or current gen versions of the game, simply because they're still running in backwards compatibility mode. They don't overhaul anything, they just really change either the frame rate or the resolution, or both in some cases. So a proper next gen version, I keep saying next gen, I don't know why, it's current gen, a proper current gen version would have better textures or better lighting, better something like that. It would be more than just resolution and frame rate, as is evidenced by something we're going to talk about in this section. So what we have now, though, is the announcement yesterday that God of War from 2018 is getting what they're calling a proper PS5 patch. I don't think it's really a proper PS5 patch because it's still technically running in backwards compatibility mode. It doesn't have upgraded textures, it doesn't have upgraded any of that stuff. It's really only concentrating on resolution and frame rate. So in this case, first off, this patch is going live today, the 2nd of February 2021, and what this one aims to do is, because previously you could either run it in the performance mode or the quality mode and you'd get one or the other. In this one now they have the new mode, which is basically a PS5 proper mode, if you will, or PS5 backwards compatibility mode. It offers up to 60 FPS, higher resolution, still not 4K by the way, no matter what they advertise, because it is checkerboard 4K, so it is not true 4K. And conversely, there are also details. So that's one on there too. But conversely, there are details when it comes to Control's version as well. Control has the Ultimate Edition, which has a proper current gen upgrade on there too, and it's an actual current gen version, not a backwards compatible version on there. And frankly, just like most of these other things that are on these consoles, it is a severe and utter disappointment. Because when you look at it, everything they have, it has been compared from the PS4 Pro version, the PS5 with the new patch version, and it's been compared to the PC as well. So basically, it's highlighting and confirming stuff that I've said tons of times already, that these consoles are just an absolute joke and a bit of a mess. So let's talk a little bit about what we have when it comes to Control, shall we? There are two different modes. There are quality modes and performance modes. And what we have here, let's basically look at it this way. No matter what mode you choose to run it in, if you run the quality mode, you get a 1440p game at 30 frames per second with practically everything on low except for two options running on medium. Some things are even turned off completely, and you get some ray tracing in there as well. Not complete ray tracing, there's 5 different sections, you only get 2 of them. Yikes. All at 30 frames per second. Or you can run it at 60 FPS, still get 1440p, no ray tracing involved at all. That is pretty laughable, if you ask me. Now, this is exhibit number 34,265,178 of how much of a joke these new consoles are and the people that fanboy behind them and shill for them. Now, the big question with all of this is we've seen so many games get all these patches and all as well, these proper upgrades or compatibility or whatever it is. The big question is, will The Last of Us Part 2 get a proper patch, or are those cunts just so arrogant like Cookman is that they'll just charge for a remaster and try to bundle it in with multiplayer? Absolute fucking cunts. But anyway, that is pretty much everything for the moment. The only one thing we do have left to talk about is, of course, the most important thing involved every time we do one of these lovely little episodes. We have Q, what's the deal? What's going on? What's up? What's going down? What's the 411? What are you playing? Well, I recently finished Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is good shit. Yakuza HD Remaster Collection is now out on PC as well, so I have Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 to get through over the next probably couple of months. I want to break it up and do maybe 1 or 2 other games in between Yakuza games. Just breaks the monotony of doing the whole thing over and over again. And then I get to do Yakuza 6 in, I can't remember if it's March or April, so I have a little bit of time in there too as well. I have stuff also going in the meantime. I've been streaming all sorts of stuff on the retro front as well. Every weekday night, Monday to Friday, 8 p.m. GMT over on the Twitch channel. Feel free to slide on to the description box below, hit up that link, and sure, drop a little follow while you're at it. You'll get those notifications. It's been so much retro stuff. It's all great shit, pal, as Vince would say. But what have I been doing on the gaming front other than that, basically? Like I said, I finished Yakuza Kiwami 2. What am I playing and doing in the meantime to break the monotony and all? Well, I've started 2 new games. I originally wanted to do just one at a time, but it got so kind of boring and blasé that I couldn't take it anymore and I had to play something else. That game was Death Stranding. I started playing that. Death Stranding really strikes me as there's an idea, or so many ideas that Kojima had, to put them all together. But unfortunately, they don't complement each other in practically any way, and many of them detract from stuff. And you could just say, the way you see some of the mechanics and systems and all in the game, you can just see the brain just turning in his head and just saying, oh, this would be great for immersion, this would be great for immersion, this would be great for immersion, but it's crap when it comes to gameplay because of it. And not only that, but all on top of it, it's completely compounded by an absolute awful UI. It's so bad in the UI department. I'm going to keep playing it. I can only play it in short bursts because it's so tedious to play. And I think the idea is okay, but there's just so many of those immersion breaking and making things at the same time that it just completely falls flat for a lot of it. That might change. I'm like 4 or 5 hours into it at the moment. That may change going forward. But who knows? Kojima has demonstrated multiple times over the last 15 years that he is no longer capable of making a quality game like he used to be able to, and that's why everything he's done has been a fucking flop. PT included, MGS5, MGS4, and Ground Zeroes had a slight hint of it potentially being there, but we saw what happened with everything post that. So yeah, Kojima fell off. How? You might say his last album was The Chronic. But what I have been playing, and what has been keeping my attention, and has been keeping me going, and what I am actually enjoying, not a massive amount, it's not completely blowing my mind or anything, it's not completely changing my opinion on the game, but I've been playing Horizon Zero Dawn on the glorious PC Gaming Master Race, of course, where it will play better than any PlayStation console in the next 5, 6, 7 years will ever play the game. And I never had any interest in Horizon Zero Dawn whatsoever. It didn't look any good to me at all. That's why I completely skipped it on the PlayStation 4. And not to mention that even if I had ever caved and thought about it and just said fuck it and tried to play it on the PS4, I would never do so because it's 30 frames per second on there. So get the fuck out of here. But luckily, I can run it at quadruple that frame rate at a higher resolution and a higher quality than that will ever allow. So it's been pretty good so far. It has changed my opinion slightly on the game. I went from being something I had zero interest in to mediocre, if not slightly higher than mediocre. The gameplay itself is much better than like the story and all. I'm not really feeling that too much, but the gameplay and the mechanics, and especially the PC enhancements, are great. I mean, you can see so much of it is rooted in PS4, especially because they haven't redone the textures or anything, but they have all the extra effects and all the extra cool stuff that is clearly much better ahead thanks to the glorious PC Gaming Master Race. So that one is good on there too. Now, what else am I going to do in the meantime? I don't know. We have more streams starting later on tonight, again 8 p.m. GMT, and then I have a good idea what I'll be playing on there too. But having said all that, we are at the end of this week's Quack Experimental Podcast. Episode 81 is in the bag and falling off the wagon, as they say. So, as always, I want to suggest everyone slide on into the comment section below. That is why it's there, for whatever reason, be it salt, praise, butthurt, questions, inquiry, whatever it is. You can shill for your own favorite products. I will probably laugh at you in that way, but yeah, that's why it's there. So while you're down there, why not head on over, hit the subscribe button, even ring the little notification bell, and of course hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video. In the meantime, of course, I will see everyone on Twitch 8 p.m. GMT Monday to Friday. And until then, winners don't play switchboards.